Yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good afternoon, and very warm welcome to this last session of i4Trust training. Today, I'm going to talk about the IAM concepts that we have in i4Trust and um, which we have based on iSHARE framework. So I'll also explain how iSHARE framework defines them. Right? Let me just share my screen quickly. Yeah. Do you guys see my screen in presentation? Yes. Okay. So the key aspect of any data sharing, the identity access and identity management and access control. Let's go into more deeper details. Yeah. Before we get into all the details about IAM and the flows and whatnot, let me just recap few key concepts of the i4Trust data spaces, or in general, what you see on the screen is the role model of a data space in essence or in general, where we have a trust provider in a data space, which is basically a neutral organization holding the registrations of all the participants and providing the trust by means of any party who wants to communicate to each other. They can verify the authenticity of the other party using a trust provider. Then, of course, on the middle layer, you have the parties who are interested in exchange of data. So, on one hand, is the party who wants to receive the data. On other hand, there is a data provider who provides the data on behalf of a data owner. So, data owner can give rights to the data consumer to get the data directly from the data provider. So, iShare framework, and by that means also i4Trust framework enables decentralized data sharing. So there is no platform or there is no central database where you need to put your data. You keep your data at where it is today, and you just enable sharing of data directly from the source using this mechanism. Let's see how in later slides how that is possible. And on the bottom layer, you see the enabler roles within the data space, the basic enabler roles. Of course, there are more roles possible. The identity provider providing the identities of the human, the authorizations provider, where you can the data owner can store authorizations for various consumers, so that data provider could check at the authorizations provider who should have access to what data when a consumer requests the data from the provider. And of course, marketplace is key in allowing data consumers to find data that they are looking for in the market, and whereas data owners could also publish their data which they can offer to the market in a marketplace. um, Now I'll explain a bit about the iShare role model. As you can see, there is a lot of similarity in terms of the previous screen and this. So in the previous slide, you saw that it's the uh, general role model of a general data space. And here you see that iShare also defines a similar role model. So here we also have the data consumer, the data provider, and the data owner. And in middle, you have the identity provider and authorization registry. And iShare Satellite is the trust provider role that we have defined in iShare framework. Yeah. Now, what is iShare Satellite, or what is a trust provider in essence? So iShare Satellite is a federated certified role which an organization within a data space needs to play, right? So every data space will have at least one trust provider or one satellite. It can have more than one satellites, depending on the definition of the data space and the organizations involved in that data space, how they want to manage and create that data space. But in essence, what does it do, or what are the key activities that you can expect from satellite? The first and foremost is that it onboards the participant of the data space, and it maintains that list of participants and their statuses, right? So um, when you are connecting to another member of a data space, you can find all the details, and you can validate if that participant is also part of that data space, by connecting to the satellite API, right? And you get all the details. So that is the key role of the satellite. uh, what it enables by that is also the multilateral trust. So instead of doing bilateral agreements, what you can also do is you can have umbrella agreement with the satellite, which every participant of that data space signs. And in that agreement, you agree to the common terms of use and the way you will share data and all those aspects, right? So by that means, there is a concept called multilateral trust, which is like if I sign the agreement, which is the same agreement that you also sign with a third party, and we trust that third party, we both also trust each other in that sense, provided that the trust is still there, given at the satellite, right? And that multilateral concept, it can be extended to any number of participants, right? So I only need to sign that agreement once, but I can communicate with all the members of the data space just like that, because I know when they sign the agreement, they are going to follow the rules of the data space. So now I know at the first step that I can trust the identity, and I can also trust when I share some data and attach the conditions behind that data, the other party will follow that, because there is a legal agreement that they have signed. um, so these are the key activities or key role that iSHARE satellite plays in the data space. But of course, it can take more roles onto it, like it can be the facilitator for all the common agreements. So because data space, there are a lot of organizations coming together, and they agree on common standards, common agreements on different aspects like business operations, technical, legal, various aspects. It could also add up as an organization who governs those on behalf of the data space, right? So these kind of roles are possible. Key thing to remember that iShare satellite is a federated role in iShare framework. So every satellite which is set up, when it registers a participant, it is not only available, that participant details are not only available and trusted in the data space where the satellite is operational, but it can also be interoperated with another data space which is also based on iShare, and there also an iShare satellite is there. So it can easily find participants at each other. So you can have interoperable data sharing between different data spaces in different domains, different sectors, right? That's more about iShare satellite. The identity provider, of course, identity provider is also a role as it is defined in iShare. What that essentially means is that we have a requirement, we have set the requirement for what is necessary for an identity provider to be known as identity provider within iShare framework, right? So it means that your existing identity provider, if they meet these criteria, they can also become certified identity providers within iShare network. And you don't need to find a new identity provider. You don't need to create new username and login every time a new application is created, but you can reuse your existing identities at that identity provider to communicate with anyone and identify yourself and authenticate yourself to anyone in the data space. And also by that means in the interoperable data space beyond your own data space, right? So our identity provider specification is based on OpenID Connect, which is an open standard. But as you know, OpenID Connect is more geared towards general use, and it's more driven towards B2C scenario. But we have tweaked it to some extent to make sure that we can also use that in B2B or B2G, like government and organizations can also use this. And of course, it doesn't lose the capability of B2C or G2C in that sense. So that continues. There are, of course, level of assurances as defined in eIDAS framework. So we also rely on eIDAS framework for this certification of identity provider role. And there are two types of assurance, level of assurances. One is the level of assurance of the identity provider itself, as in how mature is that organization, what standard certifications it has, what standard processes it follows, and what standard audits it can provide on regular basis. That defines their level of assurance on one hand. And on other hand, these identity providers provide you the option so that you as a service provider can request a certain level of assurance from the identity, right? So when you redirect a user to identity provider, you can specify the appropriate level of assurance that you need, and then the identity provider will make sure that user logs in using at least those level of assurance, like it uses two-factor authentication or additional security mechanisms as it may have designed, right? Then we look at next role, that is the authorizations provider role, or authorization registry as we call it. What we have defined in iShare is, as you can see on the right bottom corner, where we specify the API, that is just the endpoint where a service provider can ask if a certain consumer has access to certain data or not, right? So we define only this part. The remaining part is, of course, based on how where that information is stored. Either it is a policy that is stored in a policy database. It can also be information that is derived from backend systems like ERP, CRM, TMS systems, or whatever systems you may have, where you already have information about, like in order management system, you have details about, okay, what the next steps and who is handling the next steps, as in which organization, like if you have subcontracted or you have contracted certain party to take care of certain actions in your order. Then based on that, you can determine the authorizations on certain data elements to that party, right? Or you already have, as an enterprise, you probably already have an Active Directory or LDAP directory or something, where you have already defined who has access to what data. Either you have defined the roles, or you have defined in more detail which users has access to what data. You can use a combination of all these sources of information to determine on the fly when a requester, a consumer is asking for a data, whether that consumer has access to that data or not, right? So an example of the response that you can see, it's a JSON response that will be given out. So we have defined this model for request and response only. On the back, you can use any policy engine or policy standard like XS, CML, or ODRL, or whatever other standards there may be, or even proprietary for that matter, right? But in essence, as a service provider, when it requests an authorization registry, on the screen you can see a response which is given for a very fine-grained authorization, in the sense that It also defines of course, it defines who issued this rights and to whom, what license are attached to it. So, as in what conditions on the data usage are applicable for the consumer, um, and what data is it talking about. So, uh, here it is very specific in the sense that it is a type, it is with any attribute like this, and what actions are allowed, and it is only allowed at certain service provider, for example. And the rule is like uh, whether it's permit or deny, and if there is any exception condition that needs to be taken care of. On the other hand, the coarse grain authorization are also possible. The issuer and the subject, of course, remains. The licenses can be multiple, or it can be very open license as well, as in you don't put any conditions, and you don't even care about what attributes that consumer is asking, and what action it is performing. You just allow that or deny that, whatever may be the case. So this is an example of coarse grain authorization. What is enabled, or what elements we take care of in this to make sure that the identification, authentication, and authorizations are trustworthy. We have, of course, and the interactions are possible between either two servers, so that's machine to machine communication, or it's possible between a human and a machine, in the sense that a human, an employee of an organization, is accessing, say for example, a portal of data provider, right? Then it needs to identify himself or herself to gain access to the data. What we facilitate is, as I already explained, flexible authorizations. So, as of course, role-based access is supported, but what we enable with this is also the attribute-based access. So, the owners have full control over which specific attributes which user gets access to, and under what conditions. And it can, of course, also always give very broad authorizations, as in um, uh, which consumer can get all data, access to a lot of data, right? So, on the other hand, the portability of the identities, as I was explaining earlier, that identity provider is a role that we have defined, and there are many players. Your existing identity providers can also be certified in the framework. So yeah, you can transfer, or you can change your identity provider at any given time, and it continues to work in your all your data flows equivalently. It just changes, your flow only changes, that it was going to identity provider A, now it goes to identity provider B, right? So, but you once you have migrated to that, you can continue to access your data rights. It doesn't change. um, Additionally, apart from giving authorizations to specific consumer, it's also possible that those authorizations can further be delegated down the line. So, um, A gives access to B, and B then further delegates its access rights to C, and then C can directly get that data from the data provider in that sense. And all this while being provided, the customer remains in the control, as in the data owner remains in the control of all the data. And it can, because on one hand, it allows access to data at the source, but at the same time it retains complete control of what the receiving party can do with that data by attaching license to it. So that was in brief the concepts about what iShare framework brings in this i4Trust project. Now I will let's go a bit technically deeper in this whole IAM transaction. So in basic, it's basically these four things that are key. One is the certificates, the JWTs, the client assertion, and the access token. Now let's go in detail of each of them. So for I hope, or I believe that many of you know what is a digital certificate, but I'll just make sure that we are all on the same page. A certificate is a digital file used for integrity and authenticity of information. So it's a digital certificate which authenticates certain information because it was validated and put in that file by a trusted third party, normally called as certificate authority. So it's a certificate authority who issues you a certificate after doing certain validation on the data points that you have provided, right? So it's your digital proof of ownership that you can provide, and any digital certificate has two parts. Let's see that. It consists one part which is public part, where you have the public information. So it's the information about you that you can share with everyone. And there is an corresponding private part which is called private key, which matches the public key. So it's a combination, or it's a pair. So it's not like a private key can match to any other public key in that sense. So this pair together is your digital certificate in total, and you can share the public part, the public key, and the information with everyone, and you secure your private key, because that proves that you are the owner of that digital certificate, right? iShare relies on for identification and authentication on the PKI certificates. So the digital certificates we just saw, to verify the identity and authenticity of another organization. So specifically, when we'll see in few slides later, specifically when two servers are talking and they want to identify each other, or like which this server belongs to certain organization or not. When using iShare, they identify themselves using the PKI certificates, right? So private key can be used to sign the data, and with this signature is sort of your equivalent to your paper signature. And for certain types of certificates, like eIDAS certificates, which are usually qualified sealed certificates, they have been accepted in the court of law as well as as a digital representation of your physical signature, right? So when you sign any data with this private key, it is as good as you are signing that when the data is printed on a paper and you are signing on that paper, right? So this gives the other party, the receiving party, the confidence that yes, this data is genuine and it has been signed by the right party, because they expect that it holds a signature and it has been, so they can trust that information, right? Now let's I hope that is clear enough for all the key elements of the certificates, or the basics of certificates. Of course, you can learn more about them. But let's move on to JWTs, or JOTs as it is famously called. JWT is what it stands for. It's a JSON Web Token. They are basically as base64 encoded JSON objects. Why it is called an object? It's actually a combination of three elements, as you can see on the screen. The first part is the header, the second part is the payload, and the third part is the signature, right? So in the header element, you specify various things like what is this JSON object type. So type is JWT. The algorithm that you are going to use for the signature, so that is provided. There are more such parameters which you can add, like XYZ, which will hold a public key and certificate in that attribute. The payload is where you put your data, right? And because we are talking in JSON terms, these are usually name value pairs, and any kind of JSON you can put inside the payload. And the third element is the signature. So as I was explaining to you earlier, if you print out some data on a paper, and if you do put a signature on it, then it gives confidence to the receiving party that it is genuine data or genuine information. Same thing happens here. When you use a signature, or when you provide the signature by using your private key, the data in the payload is then considered to be genuine because it holds a signature, right? So where on the left you see input, this is how you give the input, and on the right you see how the resulting JWT looks like, right? So in total it becomes like this. There is a dot, it's dot delimited, concatenated. All the three strings are then concatenated, and this in total becomes a JWT. In iShare, client assertions are nothing but these JWTs, but we have defined what header and payload attributes should be there in it. Right, so we have defined exact specification for this. So there are three attributes in the header, as you can see on the screen, and on the payload you can see the minimum set of attributes that we need in client assertion, which is basically your identifier, and the time when this assertion was issued, and till what time it is valid, and for whom it is intended, that is the audience, right? So this is in the specification. Once you have provided this information, and then you can use your private key to sign it, and the signed JWT is the resulting signed JWT is what we call client assertion in iShare. Now this is what you provide when you connect to another party. Let's see how that works, right? So when in this case, as you can see on the screen, when ABC Trucking, which is a service consumer, wants to connect to the service provider known as Warehouse 13, it will send that client assertion, as we saw in the earlier slide, to the connect token endpoint that is hosted by the service provider. So it's a token endpoint of the service provider where I can send a token saying, hey, I am this machine from ABC Trucking Company, and I give out all the details, and it is also digitally signed. So that service provider can now validate that information by validating the JWT and the certificate. Then it can gain confidence. Yes, it is indeed a server from ABC Trucking. Yeah. Yeah, so this is more details about the token endpoint, how the request body of the token endpoint looks like when ABC Trucking sends that information. This is also specified in iShare specification. So the client type has to be client credentials. The scope is iShare, so that the service provider knows that ABC Trucking wants to communicate with it using iShare mechanisms. Client ID is the ID of the ABC Trucking here. The assertion type is this specific string as it is given on the screen, and the client assertion which the ABC Trucking has generated, and which it is sending to the service provider. So once the service provider has validated the JWT and identity and authenticity of the ABC Trucking, it can issue an access token like this back to the ABC Trucking. And using this access token, the ABC Trucking can then raise any endpoint, data endpoint at service provider. Of course, using this token doesn't mean that ABC Trucking is authorized on all those endpoints. The authorization is checked when ABC trucking is asking specific information at those endpoints. The service provider will validate if ABC trucking has access to those data points in first place before giving any response to it, right? We'll see that in a bit. So let's now put this to a use, and what better way to explain this by showing you in an example, right? So this is an fictional use case using which I will explain this whole concept which I was just explaining. In this case, it's an trucking company who wants to access the container data, right? So there is this banana company who is importing bananas, and of course, when the banana reaches the warehouse or the terminal warehouse, the banana company needs to get that from the warehouse and to its own processing area, so that it can further distribute it to its own clients, right? So, but of course, banana company is in the business of banana, and it is not a transporter. So it requires a transporter company to do that, to do the transport. So it hires ABC trucking company, and when it hires ABC trucking company, normally the way it works today is that whenever it needs to know where what is the status of the container at the warehouse, and what time slot has been allocated to it, or the pin code for picking up the container, or various those kind of information, it always needs to connect to banana company, and banana company then connects to the warehouse to check all these details and pass it on. So it acts as a middle party. Now imagine that um, uh, the transporter can further subcontract it to another company, and then the chain keeps on increasing, where there are a lot of middle parties, and there is a lot of stops where the hops through which the data passes, right? We all know with that it is inefficient on one hand, but it is also uh, you never get up to date information where you require, right? So now we will see how sharing access rights and giving out delegations enables the actual party acting on it to the real data at the source, so that all the inefficiencies are cut out. And yeah, right. So these are the participants. As I was explaining, the banana and company in this sense is our entitled party, or the data owner, who is the owner of that container at the warehouse. We have the service provider, who is the warehouse. Of course, the container comes at the warehouse, so warehouse will provide the details about the container, like ETA, like the pin code, whatever information it has to share. The ABC trucking, in this case, to keep it simple, is the consumer who is interested in when the container is arriving, when it can pick it up, what is the pin code for picking up, and XYZ. So it becomes the service consumer in this case. And there is, of course, an authorization registry required, because the data owner needs to give rights to the consumer on the data, right? So it uses an authorization registry where it can register a policy to give rights to the consumer. Beforehand, so as I explained earlier, there is iShare satellite, or the trust provider in any data space. Now that in the trust provider, and because we all rely on the PKI infrastructure or PKI certificates, but we do not support, or we do not mean to support all the CAs out there that are there in the world, and all kinds of certificates. So like Let's Encrypt, it cannot be used to provide enough trust or enough authenticity of an organization, right? So there is a subset of CAs which is provided as a trusted list at the endpoint of the satellite. So every party who is involved in this transaction can prefetch the trusted list on predefined frequency as frequently as they want from the satellite and cache it in their systems, because this list is not updated on frequent basis. So it's okay to cache it for and um, update it on periodic basis. But the idea is that you only trust the certificates or when you sign something, it will be only trusted if you sign using a certificate which is issued by a CA within this trusted list, right? So let's see step by step how exactly the flows look like. A keynote, the red arrows that you see in red color, basically they're not necessarily iShare calls. So we do not specify specifically how to do this, or we don't have really specifications for this. In that means it is open for the involved participants to arrange that, or to arrange that in a standardized way, right? Um, so here, the first step before any transaction begins is that the banana and company, who is the owner of that data, it provides access to the data of the container X, Y, and Z to the ABC trucking company. So it registered that as a policy in the Ask Me Anything registry, and it also informs ABC trucking company, okay, I have given you the access rights, and you can find my access rights at Ask Me Anything authorization registry. So ABC Trucking now knows exactly where to find authorizations for itself. So now ABC Trucking has the order to pick up the container, and it can directly now coordinate with the warehouse, because it can ask the data on behalf of Banana and Company. So it tries to connect to the service provider, the warehouse 13. So it's now we are talking only about machine to machine interaction. So it's a server of ABC Trucking which is invoking an API at the service provider. So first, as before asking for any data, it needs to get the token. So it connects to the token endpoint by sending its client assertion to the service provider. Now let's see what steps are involved at service provider end to validate the client assertion of the service consumer, right? So first step is that it checks the certificate, the JWT that it has received, or the client assertion that it has received from the service consumer. It validates the JWT and the certificate at the same time. Once it has validated that, okay, certificate is still valid and JWT seems well defined, the next step is that it can check if ABC Trucking is a known iShare satellite, iShare company or not. So whether it is known within this data space, so it can connect to the data space iShare satellite to ask more details about this company, right? Remember, these steps are optional if service provider already trusts ABC Trucking company for some reason. For it can be a business reason that they already trust them, then it can also skip this step. But in order to make sure that ABC Trucking company is also in following the agreements as in the data space, it's better to do the check and the status, to get the status of ABC Trucking company, whether it is still active in this data space or not, right? So how does the service provider check with the satellite? So before, of course, requesting any data from satellite, it needs to also get a token, which is a similar process. So now in this case, the service provider generates an client assertion and sends it to the token endpoint of the satellite. The satellite validates, again, the same steps are there. The satellite validates the JWT, the certificate. And once it is convinced that it is all valid, then it issues a token back to the service provider. So now the token with the token, service provider can send a request for information. So it can call the party endpoint by supplying the party ID of the ABC Trucking company. So in this case, as you can see on the screen, what is the ID of the ABC Trucking company? So it sends that request to that endpoint. And yeah, in the response, it gets the party token, which is basically all the details of this party, which are what is registered at the satellite, right? Like the ID of the ABC trucking company, the status, like whether it is still active or not, and any other details that are there in the satellite, right? So based on that details, now the service provider, because it has validated the JWT and the certificate of the ABC trucking company, and it has also checked at the satellite that it is still active in the data space. It is convinced that this is a genuine party, and it issues the access token to the ABC trucking company. So now this token, using this token, ABC trucking company can request data on any endpoint that uh, the service provider has exposed, right, and accepts that token at. So in this case, because it needs the data of the container Z, it is asking for that data from service provider. Here it is also informing the service provider that my rights can be found at Ask Me Anything authorization registry. So service provider knows where to check the authorizations from, right? Using the same token, multiple requests can be sent from the consumer to provider, but in this case, we are just explaining one flow, right? Um, so now it has got the request. So now it's the service provider's turn to assess whether ABC trucking should have access to container C or not. Now, because ABC trucking already informed service provider to that the authorizations are at Ask Me Anything, as a first step, the service provider wants to validate if Ask Me Anything is a known authorization registry in iShare, in the data space, right? So again, it gets as a first step the access token from the satellite, as explained earlier. The same steps follows. Um, it Once it has got the token, it can use that token to get the details about it. Now in this case, it's the ID of the Ask Me Anything authorization registry that it wants. So it get all the details about this uh, Ask Me Anything authorization registry, as in the response of party token. um, from that information, it knows, okay, where to connect, how to connect, and whether this is a known authorization registry in data space, and what is the status, right? So once it validates that, it now gets the URL for the token endpoint of Ask Me Anything authorization registry, and it sends a token request or sends a client assertion at the token endpoint of the authorization registry. The same process will follow whenever an client assertion is sent to another party. It validates the JWT, it checks the certificate of the sender, um, um, and then as a next step, it also wants to validate if warehouse 13 is known within iShare or within data space. So it connects to the iShare satellite. Again, it's with the token endpoint first, and then with the party, sending the details about the ID of the warehouse 13 and getting back the response of that, right? So once it validates it, okay, it can trust that yes, it can provide the response, or it can provide an access token with using which the warehouse 13 can further ask specific questions. So it gives the access token, and now the service provider wants to check with the authorization registry, asking, now it is asking if ABC trucking is allowed access to container data from container Z. Now, because if you remember the first step, Banana and Company did indeed register a policy where it was giving access rights to ABC trucking company on container C. The authorization registry evaluates the request and says yes as a response, because there is a policy of such nature. So it sends back the response to the warehouse 13, and warehouse 13, of course, when the authorization registry sends the response back to warehouse 13, it's also an signed JWT, similar to client assertion, but it is not the client assertion, but it is the evidence of the delegation, right? So, but that is also assigned by authorization registry. So warehouse 13 can, of course, needs to validate that as a JWT and the certificate. So it does validate it, and once it has validated it, it can trust that information and provide the container data to ABC Trucking, right? So this is how the a simple flow of data sharing looks like between two machines. Now, let's quickly look at the same example, but now there is a addition of one role or one person. That is that there is a driver who is a driver of ABC Trucking, right? And he is involved. So now we will see how this flow changes a bit when a human is involved in the human to machine interaction. So this is driver X, who is the driver at the ABC Trucking company. The rest of the use case remains the same. So let's quickly go through it. The Banana and Company delegates the rights to ABC Trucking. It's an organization to organization access rights. There's now this new step is that ABC Trucking also registers uh, the rights or authorizes a driver to do actions on behalf of its client Banana and Company, right? So it registers that in a policy in the registry, authorization registry. So now it's the driver X who is asking, who is at the gate of the warehouse, and it is asking whether it can get access to the warehouse premises. But warehouse 13, of course, would need to know who the driver is, why he's there. So it needs it asks the driver, okay, can you identify yourself? So in that sense, it asks, okay, well, can you identify yourself and which identity provider you want to use to identify yourself. So in the response, driver selects, say, a company called Secure Logistics, which is an identity provider in this data space, and says, okay, I can validate myself using this identity provider. So then the service provider redirects the user to the identity provider, selected identity provider. And then the identity provider, as part of this redirection, it also sends a client assertion of its own, so that identity provider can validate upfront who is connecting to it and whether it can continue in the process by checking if this service provider is known within this data space, right? So of course, the identity provider validates the client assertion of service provider. It also checks the certificate. It also wants to check if the service provider is known within the data space. So it follows the same process. It gets the token from the satellite, and then it asks the detail about the service provider, warehouse 13, from the satellite. Once it has gotten the response, it can trust that, okay, this is a trusted party in this data space, and I can now go to the user, or I can ask the user to give the credentials, so I can know who the user is. So the user is redirected to the login page, and user provides the credentials. When the user provides the credentials, the identity provider shares the code to the service provider. Using the code, it can then ask for the access token, right? So this is a typical OpenID Connect flow. There were just some additional steps in between, but overall this remains an OpenID Connect flow, right? So using that code, it requests for the token, and because identity provider did indeed issue that code to this provider, it issues the token. Now with the token, it can ask, okay, more details about this user, who the user is, who is at my gate. So there is this user info endpoint where it can ask all the details about the user. So it gives the in response, okay, this is the driver X from ABC Trucking Company, and various other details what is requested. So now the service provider knows exactly who it is and which company this employee belongs to, but it doesn't know if this person should have access to the container, right? So it it now goes to check to the authorization registry. Okay, what access rights this does this driver have in which containers, right? So again, it connects to the authorization registry. The same process follows, checking the token, getting the details from the satellite, and issuing the access token. Now it checks, okay, is this driver authorized to get access to the container of Banana and Company? Because there were two delegations, one from Banana and Company to ABC Trucking, and ABC Trucking further gave rights to driver X to have access to the information of Banana and Company. With that chain of authorizations, it is determined by the authorization registry. Yes, driver X should have that access. So it responds positively to service provider. Service provider, of course, checks the evidence because it is assigned evidence. Once it is validated, it knows, okay, it can give access to driver X to the premises because it it came for the Banana and Company container, right? So this is how the flow of human to machine and machine to machine. This is how it has been specified in iShare, and this is what has been implemented also in i4Trust framework. That we will see in the further demo in the next part of this session. Just for you to have further reading and useful links, I have created this summary slide of various links which you can refer to for referring to various standards and more specification or the exact specification of iShare and things like that. Okay, that was it from my side. And now I will hand over to my colleague, Francisco.
Hello, everyone. This is Francisco de la Vega. Let me share my screen. Okay, so in the next part of the session, we are going to focus on another component that is part of the i4Trust framework, which is the i4Trust marketplace. This is the agenda that we are going to follow today. I'm going to give an introduction on the Business API Ecosystem Generic Enabler, which is the component from the FIWARE ecosystem that we have used in order to create this i4Trust marketplace. Then we will review a couple of different concepts that are relevant in the context of the Business API ecosystem in order to understand the different things that can be done with this software. And finally, we will review the real i4Trust marketplace that we have created and how we have integrated this Business API ecosystem software with the iShare component that has been described and these kind of things, okay? So first of all, what is the Business API ecosystem? The Business API Ecosystem Generic Enabler is a tool that we have developed within the context of FIWARE that allows you to create digital marketplaces for the monetization of any kind of digital asset. So it is not restricted to a set of asset, like could be data or could be application, these kind of things. But in general, it is intended in order to enable the monetization of any kind of digital asset. This is something we are going to see later, how it is achieved. The idea with this component is that it's in charge of all the part that is common to any kind of marketplace or to any kind of monetization scenario. Basically, it manages the life cycle of the different product offerings. So it provides you the tools to create products, to create offers, to create catalogs. It manages the monetization and the acquisition process of the offers. It manages the billing. It also manages the payment and even the revenue sharing system, in case we are talking about the scenarios where we have multiple stakeholders involved in a particular product. This component is fully integrated with all the identity management stuff that has been presented during these presentations, etc. So you can use your FIWARE identities in order to sign in the marketplace instance, to create offers, to buy, etc. And one important point with the Business API ecosystem is that it is made up using some standard from the TM Forum, which are the TM Forum Business Ecosystem Open APIs. So all the functionality that the Business API ecosystem software is providing is exposed through a set of standardized APIs. Okay, well, as I said, the Business API ecosystem is a tool in order to create any kind of marketplace. So it's highly customizable. You can customize the branding and the theming. So it is possible to create your own look and feel for the marketplace in a quite simple way. You can create these kind of themes and then load them and have your own look and feel. And also you can customize the identity providers that it supports. At this stage, the Business API ecosystem software supports, of course, the FIWARE Keyrock, which is the identity provider that we have in FIWARE, but it also supports using Keycloak from Red Hat, and it also supports, if you have a very simple scenario or a very simple use case, it is also possible to sign in using GitHub accounts. Okay, well, as I said, the Business API ecosystem is intended to monetize any kind of digital asset. But how is this achieved? The idea is that the core component of the Business API ecosystem is dealing with this general stuff that applies to any kind of products, as I said before, and then the stuff that is particular to a specific digital asset type, it is implemented in plugins. And these plugins can be installed within the Business API ecosystem in order to make validation, activation, etc. For example, if we want to monetize some kind of query to a context broker, that is something that you have already seen. The stuff that we need to validate when we are creating a product is whether the user is authorized or is the owner of this specific context broker instance, whether the URL that we have provided is a valid context broker, whether the entities that we said that we are going to monetize are existing in that kind of context broker, etc. And when you buy, the service is activated by granting some kind of roles to the user in a Keyrock instance, for example. This is something that will be done by a plugin monetizing NGSI query. But you may have something completely different from this. You may have, an Android application, just to give you an example. In this case, the plugin will be very different. What you need to validate is the structure of the file, is something that needs to be uploaded, etc. So this stuff that is particular to the digital asset type is implemented in a set of plugins that can be installed within the Business API ecosystem to monetize that specific kind of asset. The Business API ecosystem supports different kind of pricing models in order to monetize all these kind of assets. And these price models are based on three main pricing schemas, which are the one-time payments, which means you just pay once and then you get access to the service forever. Then we have the subscription or the recurring price model, which is basically the typical recurring payment, some quantity per month, some quantity per year, etc. And the Business API ecosystem component is also supporting pay-per-use. So pay per the consumption you made of the service. Then, it is also possible to create free offers, and we have two different kinds of free offers, which is something that might be strange at the beginning, but we have, on the one hand, the typical free offer, which means that the offer is free, but you have to buy it. You have to click on add to the cart, buy the offer, accept the terms and conditions, etc. And then we have something which is called the open offers. Open offers are offers that are offering an asset that is fully open. For example, open data. In the case of open offers, you don't need to buy them. Instead of the buy button, you will find that you have the download button. So you can access directly to the asset in an open offer. These basic models, the one-time, the recurring, and the pay-per-use, can be enriched with some kind of advanced models. In this case, these advanced models are dynamic stuff. For example, it is possible to add fees or discounts. Imagine that we have a pay-per-use model. We can add things like an initial payment, for example. So you have to pay an initial fee and then the rest of the time is a usage model, or maybe something more dynamic. For example, it is possible to create a 3% discount in the invoice if you make more than 10,000 calls to the specific API, for example. These kind of things can be done with these advanced models and these price alterations. Okay, this is also supporting the definition of different kind of terms and conditions. When you are creating the offer, you can specify which are the terms and conditions that apply to the offer you are creating. These terms and conditions would be needed to be accepted by the different customers, and there are different ways of providing the terms and conditions. One interesting point is that for the specific case of open data, there are already some built-in data-specific licenses that you can directly choose, so you don't need to write or copy. And well, this is also supporting. This is also providing support in order to specify different service level agreements, so you can add information about the expected service level agreement that is going to be given by the service you are offering. And finally, the final feature that we have in the business API ecosystem is the support for the revenue sharing. The revenue sharing allows you to specify how the incomes that are generated by a set of offers are going to be distributed among different stakeholders. That means that you can choose other users of the system, specify a percentage for them, and then that percentage of your income are going to be sent to that specific user. One fixed stuff, which is called the platform percentage, which is something that can be configured by a system administrator and that established how much or which is the percentage the owner of the marketplace itself, I mean the operator of the marketplace, is expecting to retrieve from all your transactions as a way of payment. This is not a mandatory stuff. I mean, you can set that the platform percentage is 0, so you get all your revenue. This is just something that is possible to be done in case you want to create some kind of paid marketplace service. Okay, so this is from the point of view of the introductions and the main features that are provided by the business API ecosystem. So now we can go a little bit deeper into the different concepts that we are managing. Okay, so from the point of view of the product classification on how it is possible to search for the different products that we have in the system, the TM Forum Catalog Management API, which is the one that we are using in order to create all these kind of objects, is defining two different things. On the one hand, we have the categories. The categories are created by the system administrators, so they are common to all the providers within the platform. And what you can use the categories in order to categorize your offer. So you can specify which categories your offer are in, and you can then customers can use the categories in order to search. But you have another option. You have the catalogs. The catalogs can be created by the providers themselves in order to group their own offers using their own information. I mean, so if something is not there in a category, you can create catalogs and group your offers in the way that you prefer. Okay. From the point of view of creating an offer itself, we have three different concepts that are relevant here. On the one hand, we have the asset, which is the real digital product that is registered in the system. For example, a file if you are uploading something, or the real data if you are providing something, or the URL to the endpoint, these kind of things. This is registered as an asset. And then on top of this asset, you have the product specification, which is the object that you have in order to define all the information that is related to the product itself. For example, the link to the asset, the characteristics of the product, some attachments that you may have to the product, for example, a PDF with documentation, images describing the product, etc. And then you have the product offer, which is the other part. The product offering is the object that includes all the business-related information and is linked to the product. So it includes the link to the catalog, the link to the product specification, which is the license, which is the service level agreement, which is the pricing. It's important to note that there is not in the multiple offers offering the same product specification. Okay. Then we have the usage stuff. As I have mentioned before, we are supporting pay-per-use models. So in order to be able to charge pay-per-use models, we need accounting information, we need usage information. In this case, the Business API ecosystem manages two different things here. We have the usage specification, which is basically an object that specifies a kind of usage that can be monitored by a service, specifying which is the kind of units and the metrics that you are going to use in order to monitor a specific service. And then we have the usage document, which is basically a record with the actual usage that has been made of a specific product specification during a period of time. And the usage document is the object that is used then by the Business API ecosystem in order to calculate the amount to be paid to the provider of the service. And finally, we have the revenue sharing things. In the revenue sharing, the most important object is the revenue sharing model, which is basically where you establish how the incomes generated are going to be distributed. So there it is specified by default the platform percentage, and then you can specify your percentage and the rest of the stakeholders' percentage, taking into account that the total percentage should be 100 within a revenue sharing model. Then in the revenue sharing system, we have the concept of transactions. The transactions are exactly that, a payment that has been made by the different customers and that is linked to an specific. So you will have a list of all for a specific revenue sharing model. And then we have the revenue sharing report. Periodically, the business and applies the revenue sharing models linked to that transactions, calculates the amount to be paid to the different stakeholders, and execute the payments. The result of this calculation is the revenue sharing report, where it is stated how much money has been paid to the provider and how much money has been paid to the different stakeholders. Okay. So with this, we have all the main concepts that we are managing within the Business API ecosystem. We know the features that the Business API ecosystem is providing, but how are we using all this stuff within the i4Trust project? What we have done is creating the i4Trust marketplace. The i4Trust marketplace is an instance of the Business API ecosystem that has been customized in order to be used in the i4Trust project. Basically, the i4Trust marketplace is a global instance that is offered to all the participant organizations within the i4Trust data space. It supports multiple identity providers because we are using this iSHARE protocol that has been presented by Rajiv in previous presentation. So each user of an organization is able to sign in this global instance of the i4Trust marketplace using their own identity provider. Okay, so in this scenario, each data provider organization or each participant in the data space is owning their own FIWARE infrastructure. So they have their own identity provider, they have their own API umbrella, which is the security component that we are using here in order to secure the context blocker, and they have their own context blocker in their infrastructure. They have their own FIWARE instance where this data is stored. And then the marketplace using this iSHARE JSON web token that has been presented before in order to authenticate itself in the different identity providers and being able to retrieve the different user profiles. So we have a global instance that can use your identity providers in order to allow you to create offers or acquire data of the different participants in the data space. This is more or less the architecture that I'm talking about. We have this global instance of the i4Trust marketplace. So the users, for example, from this company are able to sign in the marketplace, but the marketplace redirects them to their identity provider. So they are able to sign in this marketplace using their own identity provider. And it's the same for all the different organizations that we have in the system. How is this achieved in practice? Well, the user access to the i4Trust marketplace, clicks on login. It is presented a list of all the IDPs that has been previously registered in the marketplace, and the user selects its own IDPs, the one in where the user has an account. Once the user selects this identity provider, the marketplace is going to build its iSHARE JSON Web Token, which is own IORI, and also the ID of the organization IDP that he wants to join. And then this JSON Web Token it's sent to the identity provider that is going to be used in order to authenticate itself. So then, when this identity provider receives the JSON Web Token issued and generated by the marketplace, the first thing that it needs to do is to validate it. So it validates the signature and it validates that the contents are okay. And then it creates its own JSON Web Token and use it in order to access to this component that is the trust provider in the data space, which is the iSHARE satellite. It sends this JSON Web Token to this iSHARE satellite, and with this, the identity provider validates that the marketplace is a valid participant in this data space. So it is valid to share with the marketplace the user information. Okay, so once the identity provider has validated that the marketplace is a valid participant, basically it returns to the marketplace the login endpoint. And now we are talking about a typical OpenID Connect protocol. So we in the marketplace have the login URL. So the marketplace redirects the user browser to the login URL, which in practice implies that the browser is redirected to the IDP login page. The user authenticates itself, providing their credentials. The redirects back goes is exchanged by an access token in the identity provider, and then we use that access token in order to get the user info. An account that belongs to their own identity provider, to the identity provider that is deployed in their organization. Okay, this is from the point of view of just the login, but as we have seen, what we want to do is to monetize data that is in a context broker that is deployed in the organization infrastructure. So in order to do that, what we have done is developing a plugin, an extension for the marketplace intended to monetize this kind of assets. The kind of asset that we are monetizing is called NGSILD data service. This is just the name that we have given. And basically allows you to provide a lot of metadata specifying the kind of data that you want to offer. So basically you have to provide which is the URL of your context broker, which entity or entities you want to monetize within you want to offer from your context broker, and what actions can be performed on top of that specific entities. Basically, you have to specify which attributes will be able to be retrieved using GET request, which attributes will be able to be updated using a POST request, which attributes are going to be updated using a patch request, or what attributes can be removed using a delete request. And well, it is also needed to provide the duration of the policy in order to basically establish how much time buying this offer the data is going to be available to the customers. And how is this working? Well, when you create this product using this extension, it is basically going to validate that the information that you have provided is correct and that you are authorized to do what you are trying to do, and is going to pick all this metadata and is going to save this metadata as a characteristic of the product. just in order to allow the different customers to know what data they are going to be able to access. And then the important point, when you buy an offer that is offering an asset of this digital asset type, what is going to happen? The marketplace is going to build this iShare JSON web token and is going to authenticate itself using their credentials in order to get an access token authorized to get to access to the authorization registry of the owner of the data. When we have this token, the marketplace is going to create a new policy, as we have, as Rajit has explained before, with all the metadata that we already have here. Okay, and the point is that we are going to use the token that we have get in order to create this policy in the authorization registry of the data owner. This way, the organization that is buying this data is going to be authorized to access the data directly in the data owner infrastructure. Okay, this is from the pure point of view of just the theory. The next step that we are going to do in this part of the presentation will be showing how all these products and all these offers can be created in the marketplace itself. So I'm going to move to something more live. Okay, so this is the i4Trust marketplace that we have currently deployed. This is how it looks like. As you can see, it has been customized in order to have the i4Trust branding and all these kind of things. So what can you do here? You can search the different offers that we have in the system by catalog. As we can see, it is also possible to filter by categories. You have the option to perform a full text search, etc. Okay, so now we are here, and as a provider, the first thing I need to do is to sign in into the system. So in order to sign in, the only stuff that we need to do is clicking here and sign in, and now we have to choose our identity provider in order to log in that specific identity provider. So for example, we can choose this identity provider that belongs to a company named Packet Delivery Company, and we try to sign in. So you can see that I have been redirected to the specific identity provider of the company, and I can sign in into my identity provider using my local credentials. So all this flow that I have described before has been performed, and now we are in the system using the credentials from my identity provider. Okay, you can see that the interface changed a little bit when you sign in with a user that is authorized to publish stuff. Basically, we have this new menu here. In this menu, we have the My Inventory section. My Inventory section is where all the offers that you have acquired and also the product orders that you have made are going to be shown. Then we have the My Stock section, which is the one where you are able to create your products and to create your offers. And we also have this revenue sharing section where you can create the revenue sharing models, and you can review your transactions, and you can review your revenue sharing reports. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go into My Stock in order to create a product. The first thing that we need to create is a catalog. Okay, it is not possible to create offerings if you don't have at least one single catalog, because all the offerings need to be published within a catalog. So in order to create a catalog, this is quite simple. We just need to click on New, and the only information that is mandatory is the name. You can provide a description in case you want. Okay. Now we can review the information. Everything is okay, so we can create our catalog. You can see that when a catalog has been created, it has been we have this stuff here which is called status. The status is specified in which state of the life cycle of catalog element, we are talking about catalog, product specification, or offerings. The three objects has the same life cycle, are we. While catalog, product specification, or offer is in active state, means that it is still a draft. So it cannot be acquired or it cannot be monetized. It's something that only you, as the provider of the data or of the objects or the offers, are able to see. And well, from here you can update it, modify it until you are satisfied. If you want to be able to monetize things within the My Stock section, you need to move it from active to launch it state, okay, in order to launch your product to the homepage. When your product needs to be removed from the system, you need to change it to retired. So they are going to be dropped from home. And if you want to make them fully out of the system, you can set them as obsolete. Okay. So now we have our catalog here. So the next step, if we want to publish some kind of offer, is creating a product specification. So in order to create a product specification, we need to go here to the product specification section. And now we need to click on new. You can see that is quite similar. We have to provide a name from our product. For example, my data product. And then you have to provide a branding. The branding is well, exactly that, the brand under you are going to sell your product. Then you have this optional field here, which is called ID number. This field is intended to provide an ID for the product, but not an ID in the business API ecosystem or this marketplace in particular. This field is intended in those scenarios where your asset has an ID in your premises. So for your company, it may be identified with a specific ID. So that is the ID that you can add here in case it is interesting for you. And well, you can also provide an optional description. In the next step, it is possible to create a bundle. A bundle of products is just a way of monetizing multiple assets in a single offer. So, well, if you create a product bundle, you can choose different products that you have already created and then create an offer for that specific product and well, sell all of them as a batch. And now we move to the most important point of the product specification, which is the asset section. Is where we are going to specify whether our product is going to be a digital product or not. In our case, it is a digital product. And now we need to choose the digital asset type. This digital asset type matched with the different plugins that you have installed within the Business API ecosystem. Each plugin is intended to monetize or allows you to create a specific digital asset type. So for example, we have this digital asset type, which is called basic file, which is very, very simple. It just allows you to upload something, provide a media type as a free text field, and when an offer is bought containing this kind of asset, the customer is going to be able to download the asset that you have uploaded here. But this is not the one that is interesting for us. The one that is interesting for us is the one that we are using in i4Trust in order to monetize data, which is this one. Is the NGSILD data service. And here in the NGSILD data service, we have a lot of information that we can provide. The first thing that we need to provide is the asset URL, which in this case is the URL of the context blocker, the context blocker in our infrastructure. Then we need to provide the media type, which in this case, you can see that only the FIWARE NGSILD is supported. So in this case, it's not a free text, it's automatically set. And now we have to provide some information about the authorization registry that is going to be used later on when the offer is acquired in order to create the different policies. So first of all, we need to provide the ID of our authorization registry. This is information that you are going to have, and which is the endpoint of your authorization registry, which is some information that you should know. And then the duration in minutes that that the customers are going to be able to access to the data, which is going to be mapped and is going to be included as the duration within the policy. Okay, so now that we have the information of the context broker and we have information about the authorization registry, the last thing that we need to provide is the information of the data that we want to monetize. So in the resource type, we need to specify which is the entity type that we want to offer. So for example, this one, for example, is entity type. And then the actions that can be done on top of this entity type. By default, it is set that you are going to authorize to make get requests to list to retrieve all the attributes. So with this information, what the offer is going to allow is just making queries to your data, but we can create something more advanced. For example, we can allow to update this attribute of this entity, for example. You can also allow to create attributes, or you can also allow to remove attributes. Okay, so now that we have that information, we can move to the next step, which is the characteristics step. The characteristic is just something that allows you to provide any kind of information you think is relevant for the customers in order to know if they are interested in your product. Here you can provide whatever you want. You can provide a name for your characteristic and then a couple of values, and that's it. That information is going to be displayed. Next, you can add some attachments for your product. You can upload different attachments here. For example, if your service has some kind of documentation, for example, you can upload the PDF file with that. Or if you want multiple images, I don't know, maybe you are selling an application and you want to upload some screenshots of your application in order to allow users to know how this is looking and these kind of things. This is the stuff that you can upload as attachments. One important point is that the attachments are public. So if you upload something here, anyone in the system is going to be able to download it from the homepage. So that do not upload something that is restricted to customers here. If something is only allowed to customers to be downloaded, you need to create them as assets, not as an attachment. Okay, and here from the attachment section, you can also provide the picture that is deployed, for example. You can choose the picture that is displayed in the homepage. And the final thing that you can do with the product is defining relationships, in case you find it interesting. It's just a way of providing some information on how this product relates to other products that you may have created. For example, you can specify that this product depends on other, or you can specify that this product is a migration of other, or that this product is replacing another product. So this is these are relationships that you can create. Okay, so in the last step, you can review the information that you have provided. So we can create our product. Again, the product is created in active state, so we can play with the title, we can play with all the information that we have provided. We can review the characteristics. You can see that the metadata that I have provided has been is now here. Is now here in order for you to read the stuff. Here we can see the different attachments that we have provided and the relationships that we have provided. So if we want to start monetizing this, we need to launch the product. And now that the product is launched, it is possible to acquire it. So the last step, in order to offer our product, is specifying the business information. And in order to specify the business information, we need to create an offer. So for creating an offer, we go to this section and we click on new in order to fill all this stuff. Okay, so We have to give a name for the offer, which is the one that is going to be displayed in the homepage. We have to provide a version for this. We can provide a description. In those scenarios where your offering relates to a specific place, you can add different places here. Maybe you have some geographical restriction or these kind of things. This is information that you can place. It is also possible to create bundles of offers in the same way that we can do it with product specification. The idea is that the bundles of product specifications are intended in those scenarios where you only want to sell the bundle. So you create an offer, link it to a product bundle, and you offer all the assets in a batch. The bundles of offerings are intended for those scenarios where the products that belongs to the bundle can be also acquired separately. So you already have a couple of offers that allows to buy each of the products separately, and then you can create a bundle offer that allows you to buy the products in a single way. This is very interesting, for example, in those scenarios where you want to give a better price, for example, if something is bought together rather than but separate, this kind of things. Okay. So in the next step, we need to choose which product we want to offer. In this case, is this one. Then we need to choose in what catalog we want to publish our offer, which is this one. In this step, we can choose categories in case they are registered in the system, but in this case, there are not any category registered in the system, so we can move. And now we have to provide the license information. We can just say that we don't want to provide any kind of terms and conditions, so we can leave it as none. But if we want to provide terms and conditions, we have several options. For example, if we are offering some kind of standard open data licenses, you can just choose one from here. If any of this is feasible for you, you can use the wizard. So you can provide the title for your terms and conditions, a description for your terms and conditions, and then you can the different clauses for your terms and conditions, whether this is going to be exclusive, the region where this can be used, whether the acquired product can be used for commercial purposes or only for research, the sector where your product can be used, the time frame where your product can be used, and whether you are authorized to sublicense the product or not. This kind of information. And well, if any of this is feasible for you, you can always go to the custom license free text and write whatever you want as terms and conditions. This case, for example, I'm going to pick this one. Then you can create or you can specify some service level agreements. Basically, you can define some metrics. For example, you can say that your response time is going to, we guarantee that it's going to be better than this, for example. Okay, you can add any number of metrics that you want to add, etc. And now we move to the most important point of the offer, which is the price model. Here is where we can define multiple price plans for your offer. By default, this is free, and by default, this is open. So if your offer is not intended to be open, you can remove this stuff, and now this is free, or you can just create new price plans if the offer is not free. So when you are creating a price plan, you can provide a name for your price plan, then you have to choose the type. In this case, for example, we can create some recurring model where we are going to pay 10 euros per month, for example. Okay, you can provide a description for your price plan, etc. And well, we can create, and we have our price plan. The interesting point is that you can add multiple price plans that later on, when the user is buying, is going to be able to choose the price plan that best fits their needs. So, for example, we can create another price plan, a usage model, something that is pay-per-use. So I can choose that the type is going to be usage, and we are going to pay, I don't know, €1 per API call. for example, something like this. Again, you can create a description, etc. And then we have this stuff here, which is what I have mentioned before as dynamic pricing, which is the price alteration. The price alteration can be provided in two different ways. We can provide it an extra price component, or we can provide it a discount or fee. If we choose an extra price component, you can see that we have something similar to this. For example, I can choose one time and specify that this is going to be 5 euros. And what I'm saying here is when the customer is going to buy this offer, the customer is going to pay 5 euros initially, and then he is going to pay 1 euro per API call. So what we have added is an initial fee. It's also possible to add something recurring. So you are going to pay a fixed price every month, for example, and then also based on pay-per-use. This is up to the one that is creating the thing. And then we have something which is more dynamic, which is the discount or fee. We can add a fee. So this is when this condition is met, this value is added to the final price, or if you choose a discount, when this condition is met, this value is discounted from the final price. For example, we can create a 3% discount when the user makes more than 1,000 API calls, for example. So I can create this, and we have our models with our price alteration. And the last step is choosing the revenue sharing model that is going to be applied to this specific offer. I'm going to choose the default one, which implies that I'm getting this and no stakeholders are involved in the system. I have other two revenue sharing models defined with extra stakeholders, but I'm going to choose the default one. And now the last step is reviewing the information. So we can create the offer. Here in the agreement section, we have all the information of our agreement offer. So we have the license, we have the SLAs, and we have the price models that can also be modified from here, or you can add new one, etc. Here, in case there are categories, you can also play with the categories, etc. Because we are in active state, so this is not yet offer. So now the last step, if we want this offer to be able to be acquired, is launching. So we set the status as launched, we update, and now if we go to home page, you will see that our data offer is here with the price model, etc. And also, if we open our catalog, the catalog that we have created, well, we have the information here, etc. If we click on add to the cart, here we see that we have the characteristics of our product that can be reviewed, and you can see that I cannot click on add to the cart. This is because I need to accept the terms and conditions. Okay, so I accept the terms and conditions, and you can see that I still not be able to click, and this is because we have provided multiple price plans and I need to choose one. For example, well, this is up to the client. For example, this one, and now I am able to add it to the cart. Okay. Okay, so in this way, you are able to create the data offers. We have time, so the last thing I want to show you is the revenue sharing stuff. The revenue sharing system is here, and well, creating a revenue sharing model, you will see that is quite simple. It's just creating on new. You have to define a product class, which is the way that the revenue sharing system is able to identify the different revenue sharing models. Any model, etc. Okay. The platform percentage in this demo instance is set to 30%, but as I said, this can be 0. And now we have to provide which percentage we are getting. For example, 50. Okay, and now in this section, we can pick stakeholders. In order to add a new stakeholder, we can click here. Here, there are different stakeholders that can receive money. For example, I don't know who is Peter, but I'm giving him 10% of my offer. And I don't know. That can cancel to this one. Okay. So now what I'm saying here is all offers that are assigned this product class, the income generated for that specific offer, the marketplace owner is going to get 30%, I'm going to get a 50%, and these users are going to get 10% each of them. So you can create it, and once created, you can still play with this. You can modify this stuff, you can modify this stuff, you can add new people or remove these people, etc. Okay, so from here is where you have the revenue sharing models. And well, in this case, I think we don't have transactions, but here in the transaction section, you are going to see all the payments that has been made by the different users or by your customers to you, basically offer that has been acquired and paid. And periodically, the business API ecosystem is going to aggregate all the transactions that belongs to the same product class, which means the same revenue sharing model, and is going to generate a revenue sharing report that are listed here, stating how much money has been paid to you, how much money has been paid to the different stakeholders of your system. Okay, so we are done with this part of the section. So I think the next part of the presentation will be Dennis, showing how all these things that has been presented can be used together in i4Trust. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Francisco, and also welcome from my side to everyone to this last presentation of this training camp. Cisco, as soon as you stop sharing, I can share my screen. Thanks. So now I think during these days you have seen the different building blocks on how to set up data spaces, and now what I want to show is how to combine all these components now in a reference example. And in this presentation, I will give an overview first and some prerequisites for this use case demonstration. Then I will present a demo of this whole use case first, and then go into the technical details on what actually happens in the background during these different steps. And finally, I will also give some hints on how to deploy all these components on a Kubernetes environment. So let's start with the reference example itself, with the use case. So what we want to show is now how to delegate the access rights for a data service within such a trusted data space, and especially how these access rights can be delegated from an organizational to a user level, which means in the end that the service provider does not need to have any knowledge about the end users, which is actually accessing the service, but only needs to know to which organization it granted these access rights. And basically this diagram shows the different parties in our data space. So basically the service provider is a packet delivery company, so company offering delivery order services, and they also have a digital service which they offer on the marketplace. And then there are several online retailer shops like these two here, this No Cheaper and Happy Pets companies, which will acquire access to this digital service. And basically this digital service will allow to view and change certain delivery orders. And finally, these online shops have customers, which are their actually shopping customers, and these customers in the end will be able to directly access this service offered by this packet delivery company. And finally, we have this trust authority. Rajiv earlier already explained it a bit. This is this iSHARE satellite ensuring trust among all these participants in this data space. And basically, the three steps I will later show are yeah, basically somehow also what Francisco recently also presented already, creating this offering on the marketplace by this packet delivery company, the acquisition of an offering by such a retailer organization, and then as a third step also now then how such a customer can access the service. Coming to the service provider a bit, so this packet delivery company is offering such a digital service about this packet delivery orders. And actually a delivery order is just a digital twin entity stored in a context broker having certain attributes, which can be like an issuer, destiny, addresses, and also planned date and planned times of arrivals. So for instance, later on, when you want to change, for instance, the planned time of arrival of your packet. And for this data service provider company, this packet delivery company, is offering the service with two different service levels, standard one and a gold one. So the standard one will only allow read access on these delivery orders in the end, so one can only view delivery orders at the system, and the gold offering will also allow to change certain attributes. And in the CRUD operations of the context broker in the end, this is reflected in get and patch operations done on the context broker using the NGS ILD API. And then these offerings are published on this marketplace as a basic and as a premium service offering. So where basically this basic offering means when an organization is acquiring access to this basic offering, it can offer these standard services to their customers, so only this read access. And in case they're acquiring access to the premium offering, they can assign both standard and also the gold service level to their customers. Now about these retailer shops, we defined two different shop types. One is a bit more premium. This is Happy Pets organization selling pet products on a premium level, and such organization in this use case will acquire access to the premium offering, which means they can offer the standard and gold service to their customers. And then there's a bargain clothes retailer offering products at very big discounts, and there's no cheaper one, and they would only acquire this basic offering, which means their customers will only be able to use the standard service. And then finally, these customers would buy something at these shops, which means that a delivery order would be created at this packet delivery company. And afterwards, these customers can then access a portal application on this packet delivery company and view their delivery orders. And in case they have these premium service offering, they can also change their delivery orders, for instance, changing the planned time of arrival of their packet delivery. Now, what are we assuming now? Let's have a look first at the general architecture. This data space, we have also already seen this diagram a bit in Francisco's presentation. But basically, it consists of this marketplace represented by this business API ecosystem we have seen in the previous presentation. We have this packet delivery company, and this organization basically has several components within their environment. Central component is a context broker, which will be the actual component offering the NGS ILD API for accessing the delivery order entities. Then there's a PEP proxy and PDP component, which steers the access management to this context broker instance and provides the actual public endpoint to the service. And together with this authorization registry, which is storing the actual access policies, like earlier presented by Rajiv, this PEP proxy and PDP can then decide on whether granting access or not to certain requests. And there's also an identity provider, which, for instance, is already also involved when some employee would like to log in on the marketplace for creating offerings, for instance. So it's an IDP within this packet delivery company organization. And finally, there's some portal application. It's basically some user interface for the customers, which would then invoke the actual request to this PEP proxy. Then we have the retailers. Each of them would consist of some shop system, of course, and also they have instances of identity providers. We even separated them to a company one for the employees and for customers. So these identity providers can then be used, for instance, that a customer could log in at the packet delivery company on this portal with the OpenID Connect flow, as we've seen earlier. And then also each of these organizations for the retailers have their own authorization registries, which store the policies on the user level. So to see there are two different authorization registries. There's one at the service provider directly, which would store access policies issued to the organizations which acquired access to the service, and also authorization registries at these organizations itself to store the policies of their own customers. And then finally, of course, as trust authority, we have the iSHARE satellite ensuring trust among all of them. Marketplace basically consists of different components. I think Francisco was very detailed. Basically, it's collection of the different TM Forum APIs. There's this charging backend component for the whole revenue settlement and sharing, and also the logic proxy as UI portal and API orchestrator and different databases. Of course, in case within your data space you want to run your own instance, you would need to set up all of these components for a running marketplace. Then for the trust authority, there's also something installed for each data space using the iShare satellite. I've also put the link to the API specification. And each organization now within our data space would now need to procure own certificates and private keys and have an EORI ID. Would then be also registered at this iShare satellite. So as you can see, each of these organizations we see here in this diagram would have their own ID, which will they use in each of the interactions among these participants. Okay, then for the retailer shops, as I said, we split it now the identity providers into two, to having the employees separated from the customers. This easifies some things because an employee would usually rather more log in now to this marketplace to acquire access to an offering, while the customers would more likely access this portal application, so to separate these IDPs. And then we also have this authorization registry instance holding the customer access policies. And about the shop systems is something we skipped now. So we won't go through now the process of a customer actually purchasing a product, and won't see that now delivery orders created, because we really wanted to focus on the process where the actual data service is accessed. So what we will assume in the following, and what also needs to be done before actually running through this reference use case, is that there are already some customers registered at the retailer shop's IDP, that there are already some delivery orders for these customers at the packet delivery order context broker, and also that there are already policies assigned at this registry to the customers. Because usually this would be something when a customer signs up at this retailer shop, you might be able to choose some subscription plan, like you know it from like a Prime model, and the customer would then be assigned such policies. I've put this in a simplified form in Rajiv's presentation. We have seen the full form of how such a policy looks like, but this is how basically looks what would be stored in this registry. That in case of this Happy Pets organization, they would assign this gold policy, let's say, to their customers, allowing this patch and get requests on these entities of type delivery order to their customers. Then for No Cheaper, it's basically the same, but in their authorization registry, since this No Cheaper organization later on will only acquire access to the standard offering, they can also only apply their such policies to their customers, so only allowing get requests. And as I said, initial delivery orders is something we already assume, so that's something one would need to create already on the context broker. This is just how such an entity could look like for a delivery order, having these attributes like the issuer, destiny, and PTA, the planned date and time of arrival, and etc. This is something that would be manually needed to be created for this reference use case. And then also what needs to be deployed on the packet delivery company side is the portal application, where we also have some demo application, which I will show later, and the IDP with some employees already pre-registered. Then, of course, the context broker itself, of course, also needs to be deployed. Then, furthermore, as PEP proxy and PDP, we are using API Umbrella, which has also all the iSHARE specifics for the access management implemented. We added a special authorization mode, which works on NGSI LD requests and is compliant to the iSHARE specifications. And then furthermore, one needs an instance of the authorization registry, which shows the organizational access policies, so those issued to other organizations. Currently, we are using an iShare test instance for that, but one could also use Keyword currently, because the authorization registry functionality is also implemented there. Also, one could set up their own authorization registry. And what we additionally need is an activation service. That's a small microservice put in front of this authorization registry, which is actually needed, that the marketplace is actually able, during the acquisition process, to create policies here at the registry, because it's an external party, would not be allowed to create policies within this registry of the service provider, but using this activation service, which is basically a small proxy put in front, one can then, the marketplace then can create these access policies. I'm coming back to that later also. So now let's now look into the demo before going to the technical details. So let's see how this all looks like. Let me start actually with the end. Let me just show you how it would look like now when I'm the customer would like to access now its delivery order. And actually, there are no access rights now acquired, so this shouldn't work actually. So this is really this very, very simple portal application that would be running on the side of the packet delivery company, and where I can choose some IDPs. Here's currently only two. It's the IDP of the Happy Pets organization and the IDP of the No Cheaper organization. So I'm logging in now using the Happy Pets organization. I'm forwarded to the Happy Pets IDP now, and I'm logging in as one of their prime customers and trying to access one of my delivery orders. And as you can see, this fails because there's not such a policy allowing to do that. So then let's jump to the beginning back. You've seen already this marketplace, and now I'm logging in as an employee of this packet delivery company. So I'm choosing their IDP. And what I want to do now is to create a product and an offering for this premium packet delivery service. So as you can see, I already created a catalog because I think you've seen it from Francisco, how this is to be done. And you can see there's also already one for the basic offering, which is something I already created. So I'm now just running through the process of creating the premium offering. So how does this look like? Entering a name, maybe putting some version and putting some brand, and we could even enter some description here. So that's actually a service for retrieving and updating packet delivery order information. Skipping that bundle. And now, of course, we have a digital asset. And now I'm actually providing this information, what was also shown from Francisco. That's the actual endpoint of the service, which is an instance of the API umbrella. So the PEP and PDP component, that's the packet delivery company. Then I'm specifying the information about the authorization registry of the packet delivery company. As you can see, the endpoint is actually now this activation service, which is put in front. And yeah, for this demo, I'm putting very short duration of only 30 minutes. Resource type, it's actually the entity type I can access as a delivery order. And with a premium one, I want other organizations that they can read packet deliveries and especially read any attributes, and also perform patch operations, and let's say allowing them only to change the date and the time of the arrival of these packets, for instance. Okay, I'm skipping these characteristics. Let's also upload some picture. We have here this premium packet delivery. So skipping the relationships. And now we have our product specification and setting this to launched. So now we have product specifications for the basic and premium offering. You can also show this basic one. As you can see here, it's actually only allowing these get permissions, but not the patch permissions. That's basically the only difference. Now, for the offering, it's also already the basic one. So now let's create the premium one. Also put some description here, already prepared. So which states is a premium service that allows for read and write access on packet delivery order information. Access rights can be delegated to your customers, enabling them to view all information of the delivery orders as well as to change the planned date and time of arrival. That's basically what this service is offering. This is no bundle. Now I can choose the product specification. So I'm choosing the premium one. And this packet delivery catalog, which I already created before. I'm choosing just any license. I think Francisco explained it in very detail, so we don't need any SLAs now. And let's put some price plan here, maybe some monthly payment. Say, I don't know, this costs 600 euros per month. Also put some description here. For instance, a monthly payment covering unlimited requests. And of course, you could also add other price plans, as Francisco has already shown. Then I'm using the default revenue sharing model. And finally, that's it. And I'm setting this to launched. And now there should be the basic and the premium one. And as we see, also the one Francisco just created. Okay, now let's switch roles. So the offering is created, and now I'm an employee of this Happy Pets organization, and I want to acquire access to the premium offering. So I'm choosing now the IDP of this Happy Pets organization, where I'm going to be forwarded now. And I'm logging in as some employee user here, as I'm registered in my company's IDP. And now I see, okay, here's this premium service offering. It's also with the description we've entered. And also in the characteristics, we see again, okay, that's an NGS ILD data service. I see the actual endpoint where I can send requests to, and the permissions I will obtain. So I can access entities of type delivery order, and I will be able to do patch operations on these PTA and PDA attributes and to do get operations on all attributes. Okay, let's add this to the cart. Of course, I need to accept the terms and conditions. For the price plan, there is only one, this 600 euro monthly payment. And now I need to check out, of course. So now I'm forwarded to PayPal. So I'm logging in now with my company account. Of course, this is a PayPal sandbox now, so there's not really real money involved. But I think most will know this usual PayPal checkout page. I'm choosing the Happy Pets company's Visa card to authorize this 600 euro monthly payment. And what happens now in the background is that the marketplace is now creating policies at the registry of the packet delivery company, which state that this Happy Pets organization has acquired access to this premium offering, which means they can further delegate such access rights also to their customers. Maybe we could just have a look at this authorization registry from the packet delivery to get the one-time port sub. So now there's a policy issued by packet delivery company to the Happy Pets organization. These are their IDs. That should be actually the timestamp of now, and that's plus these 30 minutes, because that's what I've specified in this product specification. And you see there are actually two policies inside, one for the patch permissions only on these attributes for delivery orders, and a get permission on delivery orders for all of the attributes. So then I can close this. Let's try again. Now I'm the customer of Happy Pets now, and I'm logging in again to the portal. Now let's try again to access this delivery order. You know, the users policies is something I already created before. As I said, this is something that would maybe happen when this user signs up at the retailer's IDP. So to this customer, there are already the access policies assigned to do this. And now I'm trying again. And as you can see, I can retrieve this delivery order. It's the actual ID. It's an NGS ILD format for IDs, entity IDs. And I see, okay, my delivery order is arriving at 10 o'clock. That's when I'm usually at work. So let's put something in the evening. So when I'm hitting on change now, what this portal application will do, will send a patch request to the pet proxy, an NGS ILD patch request to modify this PTA attribute, and this is allowed to forward it to the context broker, and finally doing a get now again to update the entity. As you can see now, this is updated to 18 o'clock. Now let's try to do the same with No Cheaper. So again, I'm switching roles again. So now I'm an employee of the No Cheaper organization. So now I'm forwarded to their company portal. I'm logging in as an employee user here. And this No Cheaper just wants to acquire access to this basic offering, which means the customers will only be able to view their delivery orders. As you can see, this is a free offering, so I won't have to provide any payment details, but I need to accept the terms and conditions. And also I need to proceed still through this checkout process in order that the processes in the background will run, because after I'm hitting this checkout now, also these policies will be created at this registry, which is basically now this one. where you can see now there's a policy issued from packet delivery to the no cheaper organization, and that holds only this policy allowing these GET requests. So now let me try to log in at the portal, but now as a customer from the no cheaper shop. So I'm accessing now another entity. As you can see, I can view these attributes. And now I will also try to change this delivery time. Let's also try to change it to 6 o'clock in the evening. And as you can see, this is failed because already the user policy is unauthorized. But I can also try now, because let's first log out here. If at no cheaper we want to trick the system, at the no cheaper authorization registry, I could just assign a policy to my customers, which state that they are able to change delivery orders. So now we have a policy at the no cheaper's authorization registry stating this user can send GET requests and also send patch requests, but the policy at the authorization registry at the service provider, at the packet delivery company, only states that no cheaper organization is allowed to send GET requests. So what happens now is I can view, of course, and now I'm also trying to change this. And now it fails because at the local AR, that's the AR, the authorization registry of the packet delivery company, this policy is not authorized. So both, it's not possible to change any delivery order because this no cheaper organization only acquired access to the basic offering. Okay, that's basically all about the demo. Then let's move back to the presentation and let's have a look what technically happened now in the background. And let's start with the first step. That was when I created an offering. But that's basically also what Francisco already explained. So I was this employee user of this packet delivery company and requested a login on the marketplace based on OpenID Connect using the identity provider from the packet delivery company. During that step, there was also validation against this satellite, whether this marketplace is a trusted participant of the data space. And after logging in, then I created the offerings and specified all the information as you've seen. Now, what happened during the acquisition? So during the acquisition, now let's say I was the employee of the Happy Pets organization. Also, I requested a login at the marketplace using the IDP of the Happy Pets organization. Also here is a validation against the satellite, whether this marketplace is a trusted participant before performing the login. And after I was logged in, I selected this premium service offering and performed the checkout process. We went through the PayPal checkout and everything. And what happened then in the background is that this charging backend component now sent a request actually to this activation service in front of this authorization registry to create a policy for the Happy Pets organization, stating that they will be allowed to assign these premium service access rights to their customers. Also during this process, there will be a check against the satellite, whether marketplace is a trusted participant. Activation service will only do an additional check in the authorization registry, whether the marketplace is actually allowed to create policies. So there's some additional policies that needs to be created. And finally, policy gets created there. And of course, what also needs to be done, and I've not shown in the demo, is that also to these customers, there needs to be policies assigned within the authorization registry at Happy Pets itself. And again, this is how basically this policy looked like, but we also have seen them in full detail. So what's created during this acquisition is policy issued by packet delivery company to the Happy Pets organization, allowing these patch and GET requests. Now for no cheaper, the process is basically the same. They just selected the basic service offering, so there's a different policy created, only allowing these GET requests and of course issued to this no cheaper organization. Now, accessing the service, what happened now in the role of the customer? So as a customer, I went to this portal and also requested a login, and this time using the IDP of the Happy Pets organization where this customer is registered. And also this login is performed based on the OpenID Connect standard. And what happens now is that during this login, this customer is issued a signed JSON Web Token, which contains information about these users' policies. And this can be either the policies itself, so this JSON Web Token can already contain the policies that are stored in this registry about this customer, or another option would be that this JSON Web Token contains information about this registry itself, so that others know where to retrieve the policies about this customer, which is having this JSON Web Token at hand. So, and now this customer was logged in. Basically, this is how this policy looks like that is stored for this customer. So basically, just main difference is just that the issuer is not the packet delivery company itself, but now it's the Happy Pets organization, which is issuing policy to this specific customer. And moreover, this policy could even be further restricted compared to the organizational policy, maybe only allowing this user that he only can access certain IDs of delivery orders, so that he can only really view and patch his own delivery orders that are assigned to this customer. Now, what happened when I actually changed the PTA parameter of the delivery order? So using this portal, I entered a new planned time of arrival and then hit the submit button. And what happens then is that this portal is sending this patch request to the PEP proxy and putting this signed JSON Web Token of this customer into the header. And now this PEP proxy will validate and verify this JSON Web Token. And then depending on, so either this JSON Web Token already contains the user's policies, then it can already basically inspect this NGS ILD request and look, okay, what's this request trying to do? Okay, it's a patch request. It's acting on a delivery order entity type, and it's acting on a certain attribute as the PTA attribute, and can now compare to the user's policies whether this user is actually allowed to do this. And in case there's just the information about this registry, then this PEP proxy first needs to request at the registry this policies about the customer, and then can verify these customers' access rights against the NGS ILD request. But that's still just, then the PEP proxy just knows what Happy Pets actually issued to this customer, but the PEP proxy still needs also to check whether Happy Pets was actually allowed to delegate these access rights to their customers. So there's another check against the registry of the packet delivery company, checking whether these premium service policies were also issued and assigned to the Happy Pets organization. And if this is true, then the request, of course, would be forwarded to the context broker and the attribute would be updated. So what's happening here is basically the PEP proxy is following a chain of these access rights. So it's a delegation chain, actually, let's say. So because on the one hand, it's checking that this packet delivery company has issued such policy to this Happy Pets organization, and on the other hand, that this Happy Pets organization has issued such policy to their customer. Now for No Cheaper, the process is basically the same. Only difference that, of course, there's only these get policies because it's only this basic offering. And therefore, when I try to change, so when I try to issue a patch request here, the access was denied, of course. And I showed both. Either it happened when checking the policy at the user's level or when checking at the organization level. Now, another scenario, which is also important, what I've not shown in the demo now, is a machine-to-machine interaction. because what we've previously seen is a human-to-machine interaction, but of course there are also scenarios where you have directly applications communicating to each other, and this is also supported, and especially this is something will be part of the upcoming releases of Keywalk and API Umbrella. And of course, this whole reference use case could be extended now with such machine-to-machine interaction, and that would be, of course, the creation of this delivery order at the stage before when the customer actually shops at the Happy Pets retailer and orders some product. And then, of course, the shop system needs to create delivery order first at the packet delivery company, so that they know they need to pick up some packet. And so this would be done by the shop system. This would require, of course, an additional offering by this packet delivery company, which then also would need to be acquired by the retailers' organizations. And then also policies, doing the acquisition here, also policies would be created at this registry for the packet delivery company, actually stating that this, for instance, this Happy Pets organization would be allowed to send post requests for delivery orders. But now, since you have a machine-to-machine interaction, you won't have now to delegate these access rights further, but could directly work with these access rights stored at the packet delivery company, because there's no any human involved. How does this work now? So basically, after the customer placed his order and the product is ready to be picked up, the Happy Pets shop system now would like to create a delivery order at the context broker automatically. So what it first is doing is it needs to create an own signed JSON web token for identification, and to first retrieve an access token at the packet deliveries token endpoint. That can be basically any component or any additional component, of course, providing this token endpoint. What we've implemented is this functionality in Keywalk, as I said, in the next release. So for this Keywalk IDP could be used, but of course, as I said, could be any other component providing token endpoint. But to this token endpoint, the shop system is sending this signed JSON web token, which is signed by themselves for identification. Then this component offering this token endpoint would validate then this Happy Pets organization as a trusted participant in the data space, and also then another signed JSON web token, but this time signed by the packet delivery company, would be returned as access token to this shop system application. And now having this access token at hand, the shop system would send now a post request to this PEP proxy, so post NGS IOD request for creating a delivery order. Of course, this proxy again would validate and verify this access token, and then of course now needs also to check as an authorization registry whether this Happy Pets organization is actually allowed to send such post requests to create entities of type delivery order, and if yes, this request would be forwarded to the context broker. How does all of this look like? So for the token request, it differs a bit to the default we have seen in the OpenID Connect flows with humans. There's a different grant type to reset, and this is also how this access token looks like. As you can see, there's not really much information. It's just an access token issued by this packet delivery company to the Happy Pets organization, which is just used then for accessing this PEP proxy and for sending the request, basically, but it makes sure that this organization of Happy Pets was already verified against the satellite, of course. And then this is how such policy could look like, which would reside now on the registry, which would have been created by the marketplace, allowing this post request. Okay, that's basically all about this reference example. Finally, I want to give some hints on how to deploy all of these components, and especially where to start. So I'm also providing a lot of links. I think in the end we will share all of these slides so that you have all these links at hand. First of all, what do you need to set up this whole data space? And of course, you can set up your own marketplace. So this means you need to set up an own instance of the whole business API ecosystem. We provide for the business API ecosystem itself, we provide Helm charts if you want to work on Kubernetes. And you also need to set up some databases, of course. And I've also added here several links with instructions also again about the business API ecosystem itself, and also on how to deploy the marketplace actually. And basically this is how such commands would look like to install the business API ecosystem, full instance of this on your Kubernetes system. Of course, you would need to set up some values file providing certain configuration parameters. And all of these components are were also provided as Docker images, of course, to be used in these Kubernetes deployments. But of course, you can also use these Docker images on also in a plain Docker environment, for instance. And what also needs to be done is what also Francisco showed is you need to install this specific asset plugin, which performs these operations of creating the policies at the registries during the acquisition. And that's what I've put the links here to this plugin and also instructions on how this has to be installed. Then for the identity providers, we propose to use KeyRock. As you've seen, there are several instances at the different organizations to be deployed. We also provide a Helm chart for KeyRock. The current version is 8.1. And KeyRock also requires a MySQL database for the deployment, but of course you could, if you have just test environment, let's say, you could also use some previously deployed one maybe for the marketplace, of course. And also here I've put some links for KeyRock and also instructions on how to deploy on Kubernetes. But basically it's this command for installing using Helm. And also here we're providing Docker image for KeyRock. And for the context broker, that's required on the service provider side. We also provide an Helm chart. I think the current version is 1.1. And also for Orion, you need an additional MongoDB database you need to set up. And also here we have a Docker image you can use. For the PEP and PDP component, you could use API Umbrella because all these specifics you've seen here now are implemented there. And the latest version is 0.15.5. And also we are providing a Helm chart for deployment of API Umbrella on Kubernetes clusters. And also API Umbrella requires a MongoDB database to be deployed in an Elasticsearch instance. Also adding certain links, information about the deployment. And of course, this is also available as Docker image. For the setup in API Umbrella, I think there was also some session about API Umbrella. What you would need to do is to create, so this API Umbrella instance now on the side of this packet delivery company, you would create an API backend pointing to your context broker instance internally. And basically the most important thing is this authorization mode, which you need to switch to this context broker attribute-based authorization, which is iSHARE compliant, which is performing all the necessary actions to inspect the incoming in-JS ILD request and do the checks against these policies and the authorization registries, depending on the incoming request. Hint, maybe it might make sense to override the actual authorization header because this contains a very, very, very long this JSON web token, of course, and in some cases, context broker is maybe not able to handle such large such header parameters. So you could override it because it's no information the context broker actually needs in the end. Okay, then on the packet delivery company side, finally, there's also this portal and activation service, which I already mentioned. They also need to be deployed. We're also providing them on our GitHub repository. We have an organization, i4Trust, where you can also find all of this and also all these deployment instructions. Helm charts are also available to deploy these tiny components. And also we are providing Docker images for this portal application, but as you've seen, very simple application. But if you want to have a look into the source code, how the interactions are done for the login, for instance, because there's also this login process implemented against these shops IDPs, and also how these NGS ILD requests are finally sent to the pet proxy. Then for the trust authority, can use the iSHARE satellite test instance. Soon there will be also an open source version, because in the end, every data space should have their own satellite instance running. Put the documentation about the API here. And now for testing and implementation, you can also contact iSHARE to get registered there and also to retrieve your test certificates and IDs. And for the authorization registries you have in these different environments, there's also a test instance from iSHARE, but also this functionality has been integrated into KeyRock. So as soon as you deploy a KeyRock as identity provider within your system, you already have also an authorization registry. You've also put some information here in the KeyRock manual. And of course, another alternative is to set up just your own authorization registry. So I've also put some information here about a reference implementation and also the API documentation. So then I think the final links now. Here you really can find a great collection of deployment instructions for the complete reference use case. There's a repository under the FIWARE organization on our deployment instructions on Kubernetes environments, and there's also a specific one for i4Trust under the tutorials repository where you can find all of this. And of course, also more information about databases in general can be found in the FIWARE catalog. And yeah, that's basically all with my presentation. So thanks for listening. And I think now it might be time for questions, right? I think that's a question for Rajiv.
Yes, I just unmuted. Yeah, very good question. Can we customize the multilateral trust agreement? Yes. So in what we provide in iShare framework is a very basic one, which is necessary to make sure that when you the provisions within the framework are there, that the terms of use cover those provisions. But when you make a data space, in the data space, you can add on top of it more requirements on the multilateral trust. So within that data space, when participants need additional terms of use or additional rules to be abided by, they can be really added in the data space specific agreement then. And every participant who joins that data space will of course sign that agreement as well. So that's how you can customize it. And I think the next part of the question, and the process be automated through an API. Yes, depending on how efficient or how much of that agreements is possible to be converted into, say, smart contracts, so that it can be validated in digital fashion. Yes, but that's currently not done in iShare. But yeah, that could be something we can explore in future. I hope that answers the question. Okay, another one for me. Yes, good question. I know I promised that earlier that we would be ready with satellite, but unforeseen uh, things came up, and we are running a bit late on the schedule. But as Dennis already mentioned, that soon we will be out. So we are currently in the RC testing phase. So once that is tested and good enough, then we will publish the open source version using which you can set up your own satellite. Till then, yeah, we still provide the test instance. So till then, you can use the test instance.
Okay. Any more questions? Where we can download your PPT. I don't know. I think we are publishing all the slides somewhere.
Yes, I need to collect all the presentations since the beginning for the whole program, and I will share with you guys together with the recording early next week.
Hope that answers the question about the presentation. And yeah, the sandbox. So for the marketplace, what we can provide is some test instance, of course, which you could use. But the deployment of all these components is something you would need to do on your own. So we don't have an infrastructure publicly available where you can do all of this. But we try to easyfy it as best as possible by also providing these Helm charts, because this then really is getting pretty easy to deploy all of these things. Okay. Doesn't seem that there are any more questions. I don't know. Do we then want to quit the session, or?
If there are no more questions, then we can close the section today.
Yeah.
This program training today. And then, yeah, as promised, I will share with you all the recordings as well as the presentation early next week. And if you have any question for any speaker or for organizer, feel free to reach out to us or to me. I will put my email here, and we will get back to you by email.
Also, we have the help desk on the community platform, of course, which you can use
to
also address any technical questions.
Yes, I will also put the link here. So if you have any technical question, just drop. I don't know if you or intended the section with Juanjo today, but he also introduced i4Trust Type Decks, and you can always reach out to our technical expert here. So if you guys have no questions, then I will close the section today. Thank you to all of you for joining, like very patient. I know that it's very long program, but yeah, we made it, and we will keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.